Hey scholars, this is a lecture video for chapter 16 on informative speaking. So I recommend making sure that you have the PowerPoint presentation open and you're reading through that as you're listening to this video, as well as having the chapter open or having the textbook open to this chapter 16 on informative speaking. So I'm only touching on and highlighting some of the things from the chapter. And that's that. Here we go. So that second slide, or slide number 2, I mentioned how the purpose of a message to inform is to share information with others to enhance their understanding, their knowledge of a topic. So you're building on common knowledge. So whatever your topic is, let's say in most cases you can assume that the audience knows a little bit about the topic, or not. Sometimes we don't, but generally students are giving a speech on a topic with which the audience has some level of familiarity. Your goal is to build on top of that, build on what we already know. Be novel. So tell us things that are interesting and unique and that are significant, things that are like those nuggets or kernels of knowledge, things that will lead to, having the audience experience takeaways. So throughout your speech, we'll have a couple of takeaways, assuming that you have like a well-structured speech and you've provided like very unique information. So your job is to teach. You're taking the role of teacher. You're defining things, illustrating things, clarifying things, elaborating on various components of your topic. Making analogies, making bridges, right? You're trying to relate the topic to the audience. And if your topic is seemingly unrelatable to the audience, because sometimes students choose a topic that is somewhat, it might be unrelatable. But I've had some students give speeches on like something that has to do with economics or finance or money or insurance or something like that, or even sports, right? So not everyone in the audience knows about sports, but your job as a speaker is to figure out how to create a message that helps the audience to connect to your topic, to relate to your topic. And one of the stories I've shared with students before is a speech I saw on a supplemental DVD that went along with the textbook I used a while back. And in this speech, and I might have mentioned this before in other videos, but in this particular speech, you have this woman who is older. She's an older woman for a college level classroom. She looks like she's in her, I don't know, I'm guessing in her 60s, right? So older than the typical female that you see in a college class. And she is on a wheelchair, so she moves around on a wheelchair. That's how she gets around. And as she starts her speech, she says, her opening is, imagine studying for an exam all night long, and you're prepared, you're ready to go. The next morning you wake up to go to school, and you go to your front door, but it won't open. A little confusing, a little frustrating, right? And then you go to your side door, and that won't open either. And then you finally try your back door, and that also won't open. Now, although this is hypothetical, it'd be pretty frustrating, wouldn't it? And then she goes on to say, that's similar to the experience similar to the frustration that I experience when it snows outside. This speech happened to take place in an area where it snowed a lot in Wisconsin. So what she's trying to do is, her topic had to do with, I think it had to do with wheelchair accessibility or something like that. But the point is, because of her unique situation, it might be difficult for the audience to relate to her. How do I relate to that? How do I relate to what it's like to be confined to a wheelchair? Unless you are confined to a wheelchair, it's very difficult. But she created a very unique and creative bridge that helped the audience to relate to what she experienced. Imagine waking up and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to study for an exam, and I know what it's like to wake up the next morning and then head out the door to get to class and take my exam. So that's helping the audience to relate to her topic, and that's just something that she did in the introduction. Overall, your job is to help the audience relate to your topic. That's sort of that should be a consistent theme and narrative throughout your entire speech. So, like I said, your role is teacher. You're enhancing our knowledge of something. You're enlightening us, educating us, teaching us. In no way should you be trying to persuade us, change our attitudes, beliefs, values. Your demeanor should be impartial, nonpartisan. So that's one of the reasons why I give you a list of topics that you should just avoid choosing when it comes to topic selection. I address these things in the lecture that I gave on topic selection and research. So that's it, right? So your goal is to just teach, to enlighten, to educate, to inform, to share information. You're sharing stories. You're not trying to persuade. So if that is what happens, you know, if you're giving your speech and throughout your speech, if you're giving more of a persuasive speech, it's problematic for a few reasons. One, we're not doing a persuasive speech in this class, and the nature of persuasion is rather challenging. And two, it's not following the assignment, right? The assignment is to give an informative speech, not a persuasive speech. If you're not sure about the differences between the two, if you're concerned about whether or not the degree to which you're doing is more persuasive than informative, you can always reach out to me and ask me, talk to me, or ask others. Hey, does this sound like I'm being persuasive? And then ask your friends or roommates or whatever. Nevertheless, to emphasize that as much as I can, that is the goal. The reason why I'm being so overly emphatic right now is because in years past, I've had students give informative speeches, and the overall nature of the way they develop the speech is persuasive in nature, and that's problematic because it's not a persuasive speech. Okay, so the next couple of slides, they're just giving you examples of different types of speeches. And these slides might actually be in other PowerPoint presentations, but I'm just like refreshing your memory of what an informative speech looks like if it's about a person, to inform my audience about the major achievements of a person. Slide 5, to inform my audience about the major types of cars or alternative fuel cars. Right? You see the wording of the specific purpose, the structure of the main points. One kind of car is this, second kind of car is this, and so on and so forth. And then a speech about an event. This happens to be a sporting event, right? A gymnastics Olympic event. I don't think it says Olympics, but yeah, gymnastics event. 4 events within women's gymnastics, so on and so forth. And just for cross reference, here's slide 7 shows you an informative speech about a concept. And as you know, the informative speech for our class needs to be on a person, event, or object, not a concept. But just to give you an example of what a concept looks like, this is one, to inform my audience about the basic principles of nonviolent resistance. So nonviolent resistance, it's an idea, it's a concept, it's more abstract, right? So that's one example of the speech on a concept. It's not an option for our class. So here's some guidelines for informative speaking. It's not an exhaustive list of guidelines, but just some things to be aware of as you're developing your main points, as you're developing the different ways that you're trying to convey this information to your audience. One is don't overestimate what the audience knows. You don't have to talk down to us and assume that we know nothing, but what you don't want to do is don't assume that we have a basis that we have an understanding for your topic. So I had a student several years ago, there was a student who gave a speech on something related to baseball. And within his speech, he was using all kinds of terms that are specific to baseball. It's called jargon. Jargon's not a bad word. I believe that's something we talked about in the chapter on verbal communication. Jargon is just terms that are specific to a field, or that are unique to a specific field, like baseball. So you can use jargon terms as long as you explain them, but you don't overestimate what we know. Don't think like, oh, I'm sure they understand this. Like, well, no, you understand it because it's your topic, and you've been reading about this topic and writing about this topic and talking about this topic for quite some time. It's your job to teach the audience about that topic. And sometimes it just feels very redundant for you as the speaker, because you're like, oh my gosh, I've been living in this stuff and sleeping in it and breathing in it, right? And now I'm going to do it again for the audience. So it almost feels redundant. But you can, in some cases, you can assume that it's the first time that we've ever heard about your topic. So I had a student give a speech on a turbocharger. A turbocharger as a speech on an object, and obviously it's something that's used in a car. And it was a few years ago, but from what I can remember, I think he did a pretty good job of explaining how everything works. For someone like me, I have extremely limited knowledge about all things mechanics, like things related to mechanics. I know a lot about cooking and food and stuff like that. But when it comes to that, when it comes to the turbocharger and how that works in an engine, don't know anything. So from what I remember, he did a good job of explaining what each thing was, what each component of the turbocharger was, how it functioned within the turbocharger, and how it functioned within the car itself, right? Now, if you're in the audience and you're like, yeah, I'm a mechanic, well, that might sound redundant to you, but for anyone in the audience who doesn't know about turbochargers, they're being enlightened, they're being educated, they're being taught. Point two, relate the subject directly to the audience. I've already talked about that. You want to, it's kind of like you're addressing the question of an audience member thinking, how is this topic related to me? That's sort of a question that's at the back of my mind. If I'm an audience member, I'm listening to your speech, like I might be thinking, how is this relevant to me? How is it related to me? Don't be too technical, right? You can use those jargon terms, specific terms, but don't be overly technical. You don't want to confuse the audience. Be descriptive as you can, right? You're telling stories, you're sharing stories. Use a variety of adjectives. Use language that you don't typically use. Try to appeal to the five senses. Be creative, right? Be creative with the way that you transmit your messages and so on and so forth. I had a student who gave a speech. It was a introductory speech several years. This was like over a decade ago. Might have already mentioned this before. So the way she started her speech was, it was a self-introduction speech, right? So she was wearing a camera. She had a camera with a strap, right? And she was wearing it, so to speak, on her neck. And she was holding that camera. So before she began speaking, pretty obvious that she's going to be talking about the camera, right? So the first words that come out of her mouth are, she's holding the camera and she looks at the audience. It's her turn to speak. I'm looking at her. She's ready to go. She holds up the camera and she smiles and she says, I like to shoot people with my camera, right? Hopefully you get that analogy, right? Shooting people, shooting a picture with the camera. Hopefully you understand that. But the idea is it was very creative and it was funny. And she was more of a soft-spoken person in the class, and I definitely wasn't expecting that. And the whole class just was busting up laughing as she said that, because her timing was perfect. She said, I'd like to shoot people. And it was like a good, like maybe a 2-second pause, which is about that long, right? But a 2-second pause is all you need to create that dramatic effect. If you didn't pause, if you only pause for a half second, you might lose that effect. So if I said, I like to shoot people with my camera, you might not get it. You might, people might be like, oh, okay, I like to shoot people with a camera. But when you say, I like to shoot people with my camera, right, you have like a 2-second pause. It's enough time for the audience to be like, wait, what did she say? She likes to shoot people with your camera? Whoa, she's holding it, right? So our brains start processing all this information so quickly. And even though 2 seconds is so short, it's enough time for our brains to start processing, because our brains are like major mega computers, right? So that's one way of being creative, like capitalizing on the power of the brain, on the power of thought and language and so on and so forth. Another one the authors talk about is to create information hunger. So if I were to try to describe to you the concept of loud colors, if I just to say like, if I say the term loud colors and I try to describe it to you, it's kind of hard, but I can try to use language. I can try to say colors that are really bright and they're angled and they're sharp looking and they're going every which way, and it makes it confusing for your eyes. I can do my best to try to basically get you to think and see what I'm seeing in the back of my mind. So slide 9 is an example of what I would say is loud colors, right? You see slide 9 and it's like, wow, it's all over the place. So what I'm getting at is the idea is to talk about things in such a way that makes the audience in tune, right? try to get them to see what you see, information hunger, make them hungry for that information. And that's just sort of like repeating what I've already said before, being creative and being descriptive and all that kind of stuff. But um, I don't know if that helps. So, and then the other one is make it easy. You know, don't complicate things. Try to make it simple, and you don't want to make it simplistic, but you want to make it simple, manageable, tangible, palatable, digestible, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So to go over the public speaking process, slide 11. This is just an overview of something that we talked about before, but here's the overall public speaking process, slide 11. Introduction, body, conclusion. Pretty much every speech follows this format. The introduction has an attention getter and a preview. And the introduction sandwich is sort of like an attention getter, and then you introduce your topic, you establish your credibility, maybe you explain to us why you chose the topic, and then you begin with the attention getter, and then the in between is going to be different for everyone based upon your own topic and your relationship to the topic, and then the end of it is the preview. So I like to shoot people with my camera, and then I explain the nature of why I like cameras and photography, yada yada yada, and then the end of the introduction is a preview. Well, today I'm going to inform you about the origins of the camera. Let's say your speech was on the actual camera itself. That might have been her speech might have been an informative speech. Now that I'm thinking about it, this is literally like 12 years ago. So let's say your speech is on the camera. It's like you get our attention, explain why you chose that topic, your relationship to cameras, and then the last part of the introduction is a preview. Today I'm going to inform you about, and then you give us a preview, what to expect. The body, you have your main points, supporting points, transitions, your source citations, all that stuff, right? That's the meat of the speech. That's the longest part of the speech. In a 5-minute speech, your introduction is going to be anywhere from 45 seconds to a minute. Body is going to be roughly 3 minutes, maybe 3.5. And then the conclusion is going to be about 30 to 45 seconds. You review your main points, you reinforce the main idea, provide closure. That. And I talk more about this stuff in the other chapters on organizing and outlining. So that's like an overview of the whole public speaking process. Okay, so slides 12 and 13, what I want you to do, what I'd like for you to do on your own, for your own benefit, for your own enrichment, and a way for you to really understand the public speaking process, is to do two things. To watch two speeches. It's two versions of one speech, and the speech is on medical robots. The version of the speech that you see in slide 12, there's a link right there where it says, as you watch the presentation, what needs improvement. So click on that link. This is a student who is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, hence the Green Bay shirt. And this is a speech that was created for a public speaking textbook that I used to teach from in a different public speaking class. It's called The Art of Public Speaking by Stephen Lucas. So there's a variety of these kinds of speeches that these textbook authors, publishers have created, and they're for the purpose of teaching students about public speaking. I say all that to just give you insight and context on the degree to which the speech itself is very contrived, right? This is not a typical classroom speech. He knows he's being recorded. He's intentionally making mistakes. So in this version that needs improvement, he's intentionally making mistakes. It's tongue in cheek, bad speech. He's doing everything that you shouldn't do. So keep that in mind. So as you watch, I still want you to try to identify the main points as you watch the speech. Just take a pen and paper or whatever, and then try to identify his main points, supporting points. Try to listen to the sources. Try to focus on how he's transitioning between points. Talk about his formality and then the nature of his language. Like I said, this is something that I'd like for you to do on your own. I'm not going to be collecting any work, but I strongly encourage you to do this as this is one of the best ways to prepare yourselves for your own speeches. So once you do that, might be a frustrating process. You're like, I can't really tell what the main points are. It's really hard for me to follow what he's saying. It should be, right? And then after you do that, Then watch slide 13. Slide 13 is same speaker, same topic, but now it's the final version. Now as you watch it, you'll now have the aha moment. It's like, oh, okay, that's what he's talking about. Oh, those are the main points. Those are supporting points. Those are the sources. So you'll notice a tremendous improvement. But still, I would like for you to do that for your own benefit, to prepare for yourself, so that way you're gonna. It's one way of ensuring that you're gonna do your best possible job with your own speeches. So just take notes on, his main points, supporting points, the way he transitions, how good are you able to follow along with his presentation. I think it's also talk about his delivery style, things that he does to enhance his credibility. Do you think he's credible? Does it sound like he's credible? If so, why? Right? And as you're doing this, it should give you ideas of like, okay, well, that's what I could do. Those are some things that I can do in my own speeches to help me sound and appear more credible. And I say any areas for improvement. So it's a great speech, but as this is a speech that I talk about in class, typically in a classroom, physical classroom, there's still some areas for improvement within the speech. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect speech, but it's a very well done speech. But so I encourage you to watch those two versions of the speeches, and hopefully that gives you insight and context and um, uh, some aha moments when it comes to public speaking. I hope you're all doing well, and I will talk to you later.